The frost clung to the cracked asphalt of the roadside stop like a thin veil of regret, the kind that settles in after a long night on the road. Dawn hadn't fully broken yet, painting the sky in bruised purples and the faint glow of impending light. The Iron Pike Motorcycle Club, 50 strong, engines rumbling like distant thunder, idled at the pump, refueling for the stretch ahead. Leather jackets creaked under the chill, and the air carried the sharp bite of pine from the surrounding woods, mingled with the acrid tang of exhaust. Grant Diesel Hargrove, the club's road sergeant, a broad-shouldered man of 45 with scars etched into his knuckles like forgotten tattoos, wiped grease from his hands on a rag. His eyes, hardened by years of shadows from a war that never quite let him go, scanned the horizon out of habit. He'd lost too much to complacency. His brother in a desert ambush, a promise whispered over a dying fire to watch out for the vulnerable. That oath had pulled him into the club, binding him to this chosen family of outcasts and guardians. A sharp cry pierced the low growl of the bikes, faint at first, like a bird caught in thorns. Heads turned. From the edge of the tree line, where the highway gave way to tangled underbrush, a small figure burst forth, barefoot, legs pumping desperately against the gravel. She was no more than 7, her dark hair matted and wild, her oversized coat swallowing her frame like a shroud, too heavy for her bones. "Wait for me!" she wailed, her voice raw and breaking, arms flailing as she stumbled toward the convoy. Tears carved clean paths through the grime on her cheeks, and her eyes, wide with terror, locked onto the bikers as if they were her last tether to the world. Diesel's boot hit the ground before his mind caught up, the kickstand deploying with a metallic clang. He killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying her sobs. The club fell quiet, a ripple of concern passing through the ranks. Veterans like him knew that sound, the desperation of the hunted. He strode forward, his heavy steps crunching the frost, towering over the girl as she skidded to a halt at his feet, gasping. Up close, she was Amara Voss, though he didn't know her name yet. Her small hands clutched at his pant leg, smudged with what looked like soot, and he knelt, his voice a low rumble meant to soothe. "Easy there, kid. What's got you running like the devil's on your tail?" She didn't answer right away, just pointed a trembling finger back toward the woods, her breath hitching. "They're in there. They can't yell, please." Her words were a whisper, laced with urgency that twisted something deep in Diesel's chest, an echo of his own buried grief, the little brother he'd failed to save. He glanced at the club president, Jax Forge Harlan, a grizzled figure with a salt and pepper beard, who nodded once, sharp and decisive. No questions yet, action first. That's how the Iron Pikes operated. Promises kept, no matter the cost. Diesel scooped her up gently, her weight featherlight against his chest, and she buried her face in his vest, the scent of fear and earth rising from her. The convoy reformed without a word, bikes purring to life as they veered off the highway onto a narrow dirt trail she directed them toward. Branches whipped at helmets, the path closing in like a secret unwilling to be told. The air grew thicker, heavy with damp moss and decay, the first rays of sun filtering through like hesitant spotlights. After a mile that felt eternal, the trail spat them out near an abandoned shed, its rusted walls half swallowed by vines. Behind it, camouflaged under a tarp of faded green, squatted an old trailer, windows boarded, door ajar like a forgotten warning. Diesel set Amara down, his hand on her shoulder steady as an anchor. "Stay close, all right? We're right here." She nodded, eyes darting to the trailer, and led him forward. The door creaked open under his push, revealing a dim interior cluttered with shadows, empty cans, a stained mattress, the stale odor of neglect hanging like fog. But it was the floor that caught his eye, a section of linoleum slightly askew. As if hastily replaced, Amara tugged at his sleeve. "Under there! Hurry!" He pried it up with a pocket knife, the wood splintering softly. Beneath lay a shallow compartment, no more than a crawl space, reeking of sweat and fear. Two smaller forms huddled inside, Liam, a boy of 5 with wide, silent eyes, and Elsie, 4, her curls plastered to her forehead. They were crammed together, knees to chests, breaths shallow and ragged, no screams, just the quiet terror of survival. Diesel's heart hammered, a surge of rage tempered by the iron control he'd forged in foxholes. Marks on their wrists, faint purple rings, like from binding tape, mirrored the ones peeking from under Amara's sleeves, signs of restraint, not play. "Get Tessa," he barked over his shoulder to the nearest biker, his voice cutting through the tension. Tessa Vaughan, the club's paramedic, a sharp-eyed woman of 31 with a healer's touch, scarred by her own losses. A child she'd never held, taken by illness, pushed through, kit in hand. She knelt swiftly, assessing with gentle efficiency. "They're dehydrated but stable. No breaks I can see." Her fingers worked like whispers, wrapping them in blankets as the kids emerged, clinging to Amara like she was their shield. The club gathered outside, a wall of leather and resolve, engines off but ready. Jax circled the trailer, his boot kicking at debris. That's when he spotted it, a faded sticker on the shed door, a logo of interlocking gears, and a name: Crowley Enterprises. Patrick Crowley, the local businessman who shook hands at charity rides and donated to the club's veteran fund. The pieces clicked, ugly and sharp. This wasn't random, it was hidden in plain sight, a web spun by someone the town called a pillar. Amara, sipping water from Tessa's canteen, looked up with eyes too old for her face. "The man with the cap. He brings them here. Says they're going on a trip. But they don't come back." Her voice cracked, and Diesel felt the weight of it settle on him, a promise forming in the silence, unspoken but binding. The club had stumbled into something bigger than a lost kid. It was a thread pulling at the underbelly of their world. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the site, Diesel knew one thing. They weren't leaving until every shadow was chased out. The ride that started as routine had become a reckoning, and the iron pikes would see it through, for the kids, for the oath that tied them tighter than blood. But as Tessa radioed for backup, careful to bypass the local sheriff's office, whispers of corruption already stirring, Diesel caught Amara's gaze. "You did good, bringing us here," he murmured. She managed a tiny nod, the first spark of trust flickering. Little did they know, her words had just ignited a chain that would test every bond, unravel secrets buried deep, and force the club to confront the darkness wearing a friendly face. The morning chill lingered, but the fire in their veins burned hotter now. The sun clawed its way higher, turning the frost-kissed trail into a muddy ribbon that snaked back toward the highway. The Iron Pike convoy had fanned out around the trailer like silent sentinels, their bikes forming a perimeter of chrome and resolve under the canopy of overhanging pines. The air hummed with low murmurs, the scent of damp earth mixing with the faint, metallic tang of fear that still clung to the children's clothes. Diesel stood at the trailer's open door, his broad frame blocking the light, watching as Tessa Vaughan coaxed Liam and Elsie into the open. The boy clutched a frayed stuffed bear, its button eyes staring blankly, while the girl whimpered softly, her tiny fingers twisting the edge of the blanket. Amara hovered nearby, her bare feet planted firm now, as if drawing strength from the biker's unyielding presence. Tessa's hands moved with practiced calm, checking pulses and offering sips from a thermos of warm broth she'd pulled from her saddlebag. "Breathe easy, little ones," she said, her voice a steady anchor in the chaos. At 31, Tessa carried her own ghosts, a crib left empty, a promise to her late husband to keep fighting for the fragile ones. Her eyes, sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, flicked to Diesel. "They're holding up, but we need to get them out of here. Signs of dehydration, maybe some restraint marks that'll need looking at later." She didn't elaborate. No need. The purple rings on their wrists spoke volumes, echoes of the same shadows that had marked Amara. Diesel nodded, his jaw set like forged steel. He pulled out his burner phone, the kind they used for off-grid matters, and dialed a number etched into his memory. "Naomi, it's Diesel. We got a situation. Kids, 3 of them. Pulled from a hidey hole off Route 17. Looks like more than a runaway deal. Need you to roll in quiet. Bring your kit." Naomi Keller, the club's lawyer and a fierce ally forged in the fires of her own courtroom battles, was 34 and built like a storm, petite but unyielding, with a mind that dissected corruption like a surgeon's blade. She joined the Pikes after defending Jax in a trumped-up land dispute, trading boardrooms for back roads, bound by a vow to shield the innocent from the system's blind spots. Minutes stretched like taut wire until the crunch of tires announced her arrival. A nondescript sedan slipping through the underbrush, careful not to stir dust. Naomi emerged, laptop bag slung over her shoulder, her dark hair tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail. She scanned the scene with a prosecutor's eye, then knelt beside Amara, her tone gentle but probing. "Hey, brave girl, I'm Naomi. Can you tell me what happened? Every bit helps us make this right." Amara hesitated, glancing at Diesel for reassurance. He gave a subtle nod, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, the weight of trust building brick by brick. Words tumbled out then, halting at first, like stones skipping across a frozen pond. "The man. He has a cap, always the same one, with a gear on it. He took us from the park, said it was a game, locked us under the floor so no one hears, said tonight. More would come, and we'd all go on the big trip." Her voice trembled on the last words, eyes distant, as if replaying the nightmare. Naomi's pen flew across her notepad, capturing details without judgment. The trailer's layout, the shed's logo, the timing of the trips. Liam and Elsie added fragments in whispers. A van that idled at dusk, voices murmuring about deliveries, the man barking orders to stay quiet or else. No graphic horrors spilled, just the quiet erosion of safety, the kind that left invisible scars. Jax paced the perimeter, his boots sinking into the soft ground. The club's emblem, a pike piercing an iron ring, gleaming on his vest like a badge of defiance. "Crowley's sticker," he growled to Diesel, low enough that the kids wouldn't hear. "That bastard's got his fingers in half the town's pie. Charity runs, veteran fundraisers. He's the guy smiling for the cameras while this festers." Patrick Crowley, 50 and polished as a showroom bike, was the face of local prosperity, his enterprise hauling freight across state lines, but the sticker peeled from the shed door whispered of deeper rot, a network hiding in the cracks, preying on the overlooked. Jax's fist clenched. He'd shaken that hand once, accepted a check for the club's shelter fund. Betrayal tasted like ash. Naomi stood, closing her notebook with a snap that cut the tension. "Local PD's out. Too many ties to Crowley. Sheriff's office got donations from him last year. I'm looping in state investigators, the kind who don't play favorites. But we can't wait. If Amara's right about tonight, those kids won't last another hour in the wind." She glanced at the tree line, where shadows lengthened as noon approached. The air carried a faint chill still, a reminder that winter's grip hadn't fully released. Diesel's mind raced, piecing together a plan born of necessity. "We set eyes on this place, bait the trap without springing it." He turned to the club, his voice carrying like a command in the field. "Forge, you and half the crew circle back to the highway, stage a breakdown, draw any eyes away. Rest of us go dark. Scopes, radios, no engines till we see movement." The bikers moved like a well-oiled machine, veterans falling into roles honed by years of watching each other's backs. One rigged a perimeter cam from his toolkit, another melted into the woods as scout. Tessa bundled the kids into her car, Amara insisting on staying close to Diesel. "You're not leaving me," she said, her small hand in his calloused one. He squeezed gently. "Promise." As the group dispersed, the forest seemed to hold its breath, birds falling silent in the branches overhead. Diesel settled into position behind a cluster of boulders, binoculars trained on the trailer. The sun beat down now, warming the leather of his jacket, but sweat beaded on his brow, not from heat, but from the fire of purpose reignited. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a stand against the shadows that had claimed too many, a fulfillment of the oath whispered over graves and campfires. Hours ticked by in watchful quiet, the only sounds the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the road. Then, as dusk began to bruise the sky, a low rumble echoed, not bikes but an engine, heavier, approaching from the hidden trail. Headlights pierced the gloom, twin beams cutting through the vines like accusatory fingers. A van, unmarked but familiar in its squat menace, rolled to a stop beside the shed. The driver stepped out, cap shadowing his face, gear emblem catching the fading light. He glanced around, cautious, then popped the rear doors. Two more figures emerged from the underbrush, small, scared, guided by rough hands. The trip was underway, and the iron pikes were ready to shatter it. The trap snapped shut in the twilight, engines roaring to life as the convoy surged from hiding. Shouts rang out, not of violence, but demand, truth over force. Crowley's web trembled, the first thread pulled by hands that honored promises over profit. But as the man bolted toward the woods, Diesel's gut twisted. This was only the beginning, a spark that would light fires across the county, testing loyalties and unearthing graves long buried. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The van's engine cut off with a guttural cough, leaving the forest in a hush, broken only by the creak of cooling metal and the distant call of an owl stirring early. Dusk draped the clearing in shades of indigo and rust, the last threads of sunlight snagging on the pines like fading embers. Diesel's breath steadied behind the boulders, his binoculars locked on the scene unfolding 20 yards away. The driver, cap pulled low, scanned the shadows with the wariness of a fox sensing hounds. He was average build, nondescript in jeans and a jacket that blended with the gloom, but the gear emblem on his cap glinted like a false promise. Two smaller shapes shuffled from the underbrush, guided by his firm grip. Children, no older than 8, their faces pale smudges under hoods, eyes darting like trapped birds. From his vantage, Diesel signaled with a gloved hand, a silent ripple passing through the iron pikes' hidden ranks. Jax had positioned half the crew a quarter-mile back, engines muffled under tarps, ready to block the trail if the van tried to bolt. The rest, scouts in the tree line, Tessa monitoring from Naomi's car with the rescued kids, held formation like threads in a net, no guns drawn. This was about exposure, not escalation. Diesel's pulse thrummed with the weight of old oaths, the kind sworn in blood-soaked sands where he'd promised his fallen brother to shield the weak from predators in human skin. That vow had chained him to the club, turning strangers into kin, and now it pulled taut against this fresh betrayal. The man barked a low order, herding the new arrivals toward the trailer. "Inside, quick! No noise!" His voice carried a practiced edge, laced with false reassurance, the same tone that had lured Amara and the others. The children complied, steps hesitant, one clutching a small backpack like a lifeline. As the door swung open, a faint light spilled from within. A lantern rigged hastily, casting jittery shadows on the walls. Diesel's jaw tightened. The compartment under the floor gaped empty now, thanks to their earlier work, but the air still reeked of confinement, a stale mix of sweat and despair that clawed at his senses even from afar. A twig snapped under boot nearby. Jax, sliding into position beside him, his breath warm against the chill. "That's our window," the president murmured, eyes narrowed to slits. At 52, Jax carried the club's scars like badges, a limp from a bar brawl gone wrong, a heart patched together after losing his squad overseas. He'd founded the Iron Pikes on a simple creed, loyalty over law when the law turned blind, and tonight that creed demanded they act before more lives slipped into the void. Naomi's got the recorder rolling from the car. State boys are en route, but we hold the line till they arrive. Diesel nodded, rising slowly, his frame unfolding like a shadow detaching from the rock. The club moved as one, a coordinated surge from the woods, 10 bikers emerging on foot, helmets tucked under arms, vests catching the dying light. Engines stayed silent. Surprise was their edge. "Hey!" Diesel's voice boomed across the clearing, deep and unyielding, freezing the man mid-step. The Cap whipped toward them, eyes widening in the lantern's glow. The children huddled behind him, tiny gasps escaping as the bikers closed the distance, a wall of leather and quiet fury. The man spun, and fumbling toward his pocket, keys, maybe a phone, but Jax was faster, stepping forward with palms open, a gesture of restraint. "Easy. We're not here to hurt, but you're done with this game." The air thickened, charged like the moments before a storm breaks, the scent of pine resin sharpening with tension. The man backed toward the van, glancing at the tree line as if expecting reinforcements, but the forest gave nothing back. Diesel flanked left, his presence a steady pressure, while 2 scouts circled right, cutting off escape. "Who the hell are you?" the man snarled, voice cracking at the edges, Cap shadowing his fear. He was younger than Diesel expected, mid-30s perhaps, with the hollow cheeks of someone living on edges. No Crowley polish here, just a cog in the machine. Disposable and desperate. "Iron Pikes," Diesel replied, his tone even, like gravel under tires. "And you're the one who forgot what promises mean. These kids, they're going home." He gestured to the trailer, where the new arrivals peeked out, confusion mingling with hope. The man lunged then, not at them but toward the van's door, slamming it open in a bid for flight. But the scouts were there, and grabbing his arm with a firm twist, no violence, just control, while the other secured the children, murmuring soft words to ease their trembling. Chaos flickered brief. The man thrashed, shouting denials that echoed hollowly. "You got it wrong. This ain't—" But Naomi's voice cut through from the trail, her sedan crunching to a halt, headlights washing the scene in stark white. She stepped out, phone to ear, already relaying coordinates to the state line. "Live feeds up. Investigators have your plates, your face. Talk now, or let the record do it." Her words landed like anchors, pulling the fight from him. He sagged against the van, Cap tumbling to the dirt, revealing sweat-slicked hair and eyes that darted like a cornered animal's. Tessa arrived next, bundling the new children with the others in the car, her healers calm a balm against the rising night. Amara watched from the back seat, her small face pressed to the window, a spark of vindication lighting her eyes. "He came back," she whispered to Liam, who nodded solemnly, the stuffed bear clutched tighter. The forest exhaled as sirens wailed faintly in the distance. State troopers, clean and untainted, closing in. But Diesel knew this was no end. The Cap was just the entry point, a thread leading to Crowley's door. As the man was zip-tied, gently for the cameras, Jax clapped Diesel's shoulder, the gesture heavy with unspoken thanks. "You pulled the first knot. Rest of the web's ours to unravel." The bikers reformed, engines firing up one by one, a symphony of resolve rumbling through the trees. The children were safe for now, wrapped in blankets and promises kept, but the road ahead twisted darker. Crowley's name hung in the air like smoke, a shadow over the club's own ties to the town. Diesel mounted his bike, the familiar vibration grounding him, Amara's trusting gaze lingering in his mind. This ride had bound them all tighter, a family forged in the fire of standing against the unseen. But as the convoy rolled out, lights piercing the night, Diesel felt the pull of deeper secrets, graves of the missing, loyalties tested, and a reckoning that would demand everything. The frost returned with the stars, cold and clarifying, as the iron pikes chased justice into the dark. The state troopers' lights sliced through the encroaching night like blue veins pulsing in the dark, their cruisers bumping over roots to halt in a semicircle around the trailer. The forest air thickened with the scent of heated brakes and authority's sterile edge, cutting through the pine and exhaust that had defined the iron pike's vigil. Diesel lowered his binoculars, the weight of them suddenly heavy in his gloved hand, as the captured man slumped against the van's side, wrists secured with zip ties that gleamed under the floodlights. His cap lay discarded in the dirt, trampled by a boot, revealing a face etched with the desperation of a man who'd built his life on fragile lies. The new children, 2 boys, no older than 7, their hoods now pushed back to show tear-streaked cheeks, huddled with Amara in Tessa's car, the paramedic's voice a soft murmur weaving through the chaos like a lifeline. Jax stepped forward to meet the lead trooper, a tall woman with a no-nonsense braid and eyes that scanned the scene like radar. Captain Elena Ruiz, they'd learn later, her badge catching the light as she extended a hand. "Iron pikes," she said. Not a question but an acknowledgement, her tone laced with the respect earned from years of crossing paths with clubs that bridged the gaps law couldn't touch. "Naomi Keller flagged your op. Good call bypassing local. We've got questions, but first, evidence." Her team moved efficiently, gloved hands photographing the trailer, the empty compartment, the van's interior, where faint traces of hurried packing lingered, a rolled blanket, a half-empty water bottle, signs of preparation for journeys cut short. Diesel hung back, his broad shoulders tense under the leather vest, watching as the man was guided to a cruiser. No rough handling, Ruiz's crew knew the line between justice and spectacle, but Diesel's gut churned with the unfinished pull of it all. The oath he'd sworn years ago, in a foxhole under starless skies, to drag predators into the light for every soul they'd dimmed. This cog in Crowley's machine wasn't the head, he was the wheel turning blindly. As the trooper read rights in a steady cadence, the man cracked, words spilling like oil from a punctured tank. "It wasn't my idea," he muttered, eyes flicking to the bikers as if they held the real judgment. "Crowley, he sets the meets. I just drive. Kids from the edges, parks, bus stops. He says it's relocation, better lives, pays cash, no questions." The confession hung in the air, a bitter fog that made Jax's fists clench at his sides. Crowley Enterprises wasn't just a sponsor. It was a shield. Its freight hauls, masking routes that snaked into oblivion. Jax had accepted that man's handshake at last year's veteran ride, the check for the club's shelter gleaming white against the podium. Betrayal soured like bad fuel in his veins, a reminder that trust was a blade that cut both ways. He glanced at Diesel, the silent exchange heavy with the club's creed. Family chosen, promises unbreakable. "We ride with this," Jack said low, as Ruiz pulled him aside for details. "But Crowley's not waiting in cuffs. We need to smoke him out before he buries this." Naomi worked the perimeter, her laptop open on the sedan's hood, uploading footage to secure servers, timestamps, faces, the gear emblem tying it all to the Enterprise. At 34, she'd traded silk suits for fieldwork after a case that exposed a corrupt judge, her own redemption forged in the Pike's fire. "He's naming drop points," she relayed to Diesel, her voice clipped over the radio. "Old warehouse on the county line, nights only. Crowley oversees pickups himself, or so this guy claims. If we move fast, state can raid by dawn, but we need eyes inside the town. Locals are too tangled. Her words stirred the ethical storm brewing. The sheriff's office, funded by Crowley's generosity, might tip him off. The club faced a dilemma. Expose without alienating allies, uphold justice without becoming vigilantes. Diesel nodded, mounting his bike as the troopers loaded the van for impound. The engine's rumble vibrated through him, a familiar pulse grounding the rage. Amara watched from the car window, her small face illuminated by the dashboard glow, a question in her eyes that tugged at his scars. The brother lost to shadows, the promise to never look away. "We'll get the rest," he mouthed through the glass, and she nodded, the trust budding like a fragile flame. Tessa drove off first. The children bundled safe toward a neutral clinic, her taillights fading into the trail like guiding stars. The convoy reformed under the moon's pale watch, engines idling with restrained thunder. Jax briefed the crew in hushed tones, the circle of helmets nodding in unison. Veterans like Rocco Hawk Landry, a former medic with burns mapping his arms from an IED blast, and Lena Spark Torres, whose quick hands had hot-wired more locks than engines. They were the chosen kin, bound not by blood, but by oaths whispered in garages and graveyards. "No solo runs," Jax ordered. "We pair with state, but our intel leads. Crowley's gala tomorrow. Big donor night at the community hall. He shows face, we show proof." As they rolled out, the forest gave way to open road. Headlights carving paths through the velvet dark. The air rushed cool against Diesel's skin, carrying the faint salt of distant ocean and the weight of unfolding truth. The captured man's words echoed, relocation, better lives, a lie polished for the gullible. But the Iron Pikes knew better. This was erasure, children vanishing into networks that profited on silence. Diesel's mind raced ahead to the warehouse, the gala, the threads leading to Crowley's door. A moral crossroads loomed: confront the pillar of the town, risk the club's fragile peace, or let the system grind slow. The answer burned clear. Honor demanded the stand, redemption the price. Miles blurred, the highway a ribbon of resolve under tires. Back at the clubhouse, a weathered barn converted into sanctuary, ringed by chain link and floodlights, the crew debriefed over black coffee steaming in mugs. Maps spread across a scarred table, red pins marking Crowley's empire. Depots, routes, the trailer as ground zero. Naomi cross-referenced manifests, her fingers flying. "He's moving tomorrow. Freight disguised as charity supplies. If we intercept..." But Jax held up a hand, the room falling quiet. "We don't intercept. We illuminate. State takes the collar. We take the watch." It was a delicate balance, loyalty to law without surrendering the fight. Diesel stepped outside for air, the night crisp with the promise of storm. Stars wheeled overhead, indifferent witnesses to human frailties. Amara's cry from the morning replayed, a hook that had reeled them into this abyss. The club was family, but this tested the bonds. Crowley's reach might finger old wounds, paint them as threats. Yet, turning back, unthinkable. As the first rain pattered on the tin roof, Diesel felt the shift, from rescuers to reckoners, chasing justice through the rain-slicked dark. The road called, engines ready, oaths unbroken. Crowley's web quivered, the Iron Pikes closing in, one silent promise at a time. If this story is stirring something in you, hit that like button below. It helps spread these tales of courage and hope to more ears who need them. Rain lashed the clubhouse windows in relentless sheets, turning the gravel lot into a mirror of fractured stars. Inside, the air hung heavy with the aroma of strong coffee and oiled leather. The club's inner circle gathered around the scarred oak table like conspirators in a dimly lit war room. Flickering fluorescent bulbs cast long shadows across maps pinned with red markers, tracing Crowley Enterprises' veins through the county, warehouses, backroad depots, and the community hall, where the gala loomed like a gilded trap. Diesel leaned against the wall, arms crossed over his broad chest, the damp chill from his ride still seeping through his vest. At 45, he felt the years in his bones, but the fire of purpose burned away the ache, a echo of the desert nights where he'd buried his brother and sworn to stand sentinel for the lost. Jax paced the room's edge, his salt and pepper beard framing a face etched with resolve, the limp from his old wound barely noticeable in the heat of strategy. "Gala's at 8 sharp tomorrow," he said, tapping a marker on the hall's location. "Crowley's the keynote, handing out plaques for his youth outreach fund, smiling for the mayor, the sheriff, the whole rotten circle." The words landed like gravel in an engine, rough and grinding. The Iron Pikes had ridden in those charity events before, their presence a nod to community ties, but now it twisted into irony. Jax's eyes met Diesel's, the unspoken weight of betrayal passing between them. Oaths to protect the vulnerable, now weaponized, against a man who'd worn the mask of ally. Naomi sat at the table's head, her laptop screen glowing with encrypted files, the captured man's confession transcribed, van plates linked to Crowley manifests, even a grainy photo from the trailer's shed showing the gear logo in sharper detail. At 34, her sharp features softened only in moments like this, when the fight aligned with her vow to dismantle the systems that failed the small and silent. "He's slippery," she warned, scrolling through donor lists. "But the gala's public, cameras, witnesses, we plant seeds there, anonymous tips to the press, our footage leaked through back channels. State troopers will shadow, but we can't go in loud. One wrong move, and he spins it as a club grudge." Her voice carried the precision of courtrooms, but underneath lay the raw edge of someone who'd lost faith in blind justice long ago. Diesel pushed off the wall, his boots thudding softly on the worn floorboards. The rain's rhythm outside mirrored the pulse in his temples, a steady drum urging action. Amara's face flashed in his mind, those wide eyes from the roadside, the trust she'd placed in his rough hands. He'd carried kids like her before, in memories scarred by war, promising safety that sometimes came too late. This time, the promise bound the whole club, a chain linking veterans like Rocco, whose scarred arms flexed as he cleaned his scope, and Lena, sketching entry points with a mechanic's steady hand. "I'll go in," Diesel volunteered, his rumble cutting the murmur. "Blend with the crowd. Eyes on Crowley, earpiece to you all. If he slips, we have him." Jax nodded, the decision settling like a key turning in a lock. The plan unfolded in quiet efficiency. Half the crew would stake out the warehouse on the county line, monitoring for the freight run Naomi's intel flagged, disguised charity crates that hid darker cargo. The rest, including Diesel, would infiltrate the gala, vests traded for button-downs, bikes left in the shadows. Tessa would stay with the kids at a safe house, her paramedic kit ready for any fallout, her own grief a silent fuel to heal what the world broke. "We honor the small ones," Jax said, his voice low and binding, "not with fists but with light. Expose the rot, let it wither." As the meeting broke, Diesel stepped into the storm. Rain sluicing over him like absolution. The clubhouse lights blurred in the downpour, and he straddled his bike. The engine's growl, a defiant roar against the gale. The road to the safe house wound through sodden fields, headlights carving tunnels through the night. There, in a modest cabin ringed by evergreens, Tessa met him at the door, her wire-rimmed glasses fogged from the warmth inside. Amara sat on the couch, knees drawn up, colouring a picture of motorcycles under a bright sun. Liam and Elsie asleep nearby, their breaths even in the lamplight. The air smelled of chamomile tea and fresh bread, a fragile haven pieced from the club's donations. "They're holding," Tessa said softly, wiping her hands on her apron. At 31, her healer's touch had mended more than bodies. It stitched the invisible wounds of fear. "Amara asked for you," said the big man with the strong voice, would make the bad dreams stop. Diesel knelt, his wet jacket dripping, and Amara launched into his arms, her small frame pressing close. "Did you catch him? The cat man?" she whispered, crayon smudges on her cheeks. "Not all yet," he replied, his voice a gentle thunder. "But we're close. Promise!" The word hung between them, heavy with the club's creed, promises that outlasted storms and secrets. He tucked her hair behind her ear, the gesture echoing the brother he'd lost, the redemption sought in every stand taken. Tessa watched, a quiet nod passing understanding. They were all bound by such vows, a family chosen in the crucible of care. Dawn crept in grey and reluctant, the rain easing to a mist that cloaked the community hall like a shroud. Diesel arrived early, blending into the setup crew, hauling chairs under the watchful eye of event staff, his build passing for hired muscle. The hall buzzed with preparations, banners touting hope for tomorrow's youth, tables laden with hors d'oeuvres, a podium gleaming under spotlights. Crowley Enterprises' logo dominated the stage, interlocking gears promising progress. Diesel's earpiece crackled faintly. Jack's from the warehouse stakeout. "Quiet so far. Freight truck idling, but no movement." Naomi's voice followed. "Press is here. Leaks primed." As guests filtered in, town suits, smiling families, the sheriff clapping backs, Diesel spotted him. Patrick Crowley, 50 and impeccably tailored, navigated the room with the ease of a king in his court. His handshake was firm, laugh booming, but Diesel saw the flicker, eyes scanning exits, a subtle tension in his posture. The man who'd sponsored rides now stood exposed in Diesel's gaze, a predator draped in philanthropy. When Crowley took the podium, lights bathing him in false gold, Diesel slipped closer. Phone hidden to capture the speech, words of uplift, masking the void he'd filled with stolen lives. Then the thread pulled taut. A state trooper, plainclothes, entered from the side, badge flashing discreetly. Whispers rippled as Naomi's leak hit the wires, headlines flickering on phones. Local tycoon linked to child relocation ring. Crowley's face paled under the lights, his prepared remarks faltering. Questions erupted from the crowd, the sheriff's smile cracking. Diesel held position, heart steady, the club's invisible net closing. But as Crowley bolted for a side door, aides scrambling, Diesel's radio buzzed. Warehouse alarms. The web trembled, the reckoning unfolding in tandem, promises colliding with corruption, the iron pike's light piercing the gala's gloss. Outside, engines waited in the mist, ready to ride into the fray. Diesel moved with the flow, the moral storm breaking, justice's thunder rolling closer. The children's faces fueled him, a legacy of honor demanding everything and yielding nothing less. The mist clung to the community hall's brick facade like a whispered secret, softening the edges of the arriving luxury cars and the flash of camera bulbs under the marquee. Inside, the air shimmered with the scent of polished wood and catered elegance. Roast lamb mingling with floral centerpieces, a string quartet's melody weaving through the murmur of small talk. Diesel navigated the crowd in a borrowed button-down that strained against his shoulders. His calloused hands clasped loosely to blend with the suits and gowns. The earpiece nestled in his ear hummed faintly, a lifeline to the club's web. Jax's gravelly updates from the warehouse, Naomi's clipped relays from a van parked curbside. At 45, Diesel felt the incongruity of it all, these starched collars against his road-worn soul. But the mission anchored him, a fulfillment of the vow etched in his scars, to pull the lost from the brink no matter the costume. Crowley held court near the podium, his tailored suit impeccable, silver hair catching the chandelier's glow like a halo of deceit. He laughed with the mayor, a booming sound that echoed false, his eyes darting occasionally to the exits as if the room's warmth pressed too close. Diesel edged nearer, sipping a water glass to mask his vigil, the cool liquid steadying the fire in his chest. Memories flickered. Amara's small hand in his at the safe house, her crayon drawing of bikes as guardians, a child's faith mirroring the brother's trust he'd failed long ago. That failure had forged him into the Iron Pike's road sergeant, binding him to this chosen family, where promises outlasted the miles. The quartet paused, spotlights converging on the stage as Crowley ascended, his steps measured, a plaque in hand for the Youth Fund. "Tonight, we celebrate progress," he intoned, voice smooth as oiled gears, gesturing to banners emblazoned with his enterprise's logo, relocating hope for those on the edges, giving tomorrow's stars a brighter path. The crowd applauded, polite ripples masking the undercurrent of unease. Phones buzzed in pockets, Naomi's leak seeding doubt like rain on dry earth. Diesel's jaw tightened, the words twisting like the lies that had lured children into vans and hidden compartments. He thumbed his hidden recorder, capturing every syllable, the air thick with the perfume of impending unraveling. Jax's voice crackled in his ear. Warehouse hot, trucks loading, crates marked charity, but scouts spot movement inside. Small shapes, shadows, holding position. Diesel's pulse quickened, the gala's gloss fracturing in his mind. The county line depot, a hulking shadow of corrugated steel under sodium lights, lay miles away, but the club's net spanned it all. Rocco and Lena on overwatch, scopes trained through chain-link gaps, their breaths synced in silent vigil. Rocco, his burn-scarred arms steady on the rifle stock, whispered updates. "Guards patrolling. 2, no, 3. Kids' voices faint. We wait for your signal." Loyalty pulsed through the radio waves. The Iron Pike's creed, a thread pulling taut across the night. On stage, Crowley's speech faltered as a reporter in the front row raised her hand, voice cutting sharp. "Mr. Crowley, care to comment on reports linking your firm to unauthorized relocations? State investigators are en route to your properties as we speak." The room hushed, a collective inhale like wind before thunder. Crowley's face drained of color, his knuckles whitening on the podium, eyes locking briefly on Diesel in the crowd. A flicker of recognition, then denial. "Baseless rumors," he blustered. But the damage bloomed. Whispers swelled, the sheriff's forced smile cracking as he edged toward the wings. Phones lit up, headlines scrolling. "Tycoon exposed in Shadow Network." Diesel held still, a rock in the tide, as plainclothes troopers materialized from the throng, Ruiz's team, badges glinting, moving with purposeful calm. Chaos uncoiled gracefully. Aides clustered around Crowley, blocking his path to the side door, while guests parted like a sea-sensing storm. He shoved through, suit jacket flapping, but Diesel was there, stepping into the hallway's dim corridor, the scent of rain-soaked coats heavy from an open exit. "End of the line," Diesel said, voice low and unyielding, blocking the frame without touch. Crowley's breath hitched, eyes wild under the emergency lights, the gear pin on his lapel mocking the empire crumbling. "You, the club, this is harassment. I'll bury you." But his words rang hollow, undercut by the approaching footsteps of troopers, Naomi's voice in Diesel's ear. "Feeds live, warehouse raid starting, kids secured, no shots fired." Back at the depot, the operation snapped into motion under the moon's indifferent gaze. Jax gunned his bike from cover, the convoy's roar shattering the night's hush as troopers breached the gates. Crates splintered open to reveal huddled forms. 5 more children, wide-eyed and trembling, emerging into flashlights' beams like ghosts reclaiming substance. Guards surrendered without fight, hands raised, the air electric with relief and the faint, acrid whiff of fear sweat. Tessa's voice joined the radio chorus from the safe house. Amara's asking, "Tell her it's over." But Diesel knew the threads lingered. Crowley's network snaked deeper, accomplices in suits and shadows waiting to scatter. In the hallway, Crowley sagged against the wall as cuffs clicked softly, Ruiz reading rights with the precision of a closing argument. "You promised better lives," Diesel murmured, close enough to see the man's facade crack, tears streaking his polished cheeks. Not pity, but the raw edge of justice, moral, unyielding, the kind that redeemed the broken by holding the mighty to account. The gala's melody drifted faintly, a dirge now, as Diesel slipped out into the mist, engines idling in the lot like faithful hounds. Jax's bike pulled up, the president's nod heavy with the weight of victory half won. Webs tearing, more raids by morning, towns waking. They rode into the clearing dark, tires hissing on wet asphalt, the road a vein carrying the pulse of oaths fulfilled. Amara's drawing waited at the safe house, a beacon amid the storm's aftermath. But Diesel felt the pull of loose ends, whispers of higher links, loyalties to test in the light of day. The iron pikes rolled on, family forged stronger in the fray, chasing the last shadows, where children's futures hung in the balance. Dawn edged the horizon, pale and promising, as the reckoning's final turn loomed, demanding one more stand for honor's quiet legacy. The first blush of dawn painted the horizon in strokes of rose and gold, bleeding through the mist that still clung to the winding county roads like a reluctant farewell. The iron pikes convoy cut through it, engines purring low and steady, their headlights dimmed now that the night had surrendered. Diesel rode point, the wind whipping at his vest, carrying the fresh ozone-tinged scent of rain-washed earth and the faint, salty whisper of the approaching sea. His knuckles ached from the night's grip on the handlebars, but the tension in his chest eased with each mile, a slow uncoiling of the oath that had bound him since that desert vigil over his brother's grave. At 45, he'd chased shadows long enough to know victory tasted bittersweet, salty with the lives scarred, sweet with the promise kept. Behind him, Jax's bike flanked the pack, the president's silhouette a steadfast anchor amid the rumble of tires on damp asphalt. The warehouse raid's echoes lingered in their radios. Tessa's calm confirmations from the safe house, Naomi's triumphant updates as state investigators peeled back layers of Crowley's empire. 5 more children rescued from the crates, huddled, wide-eyed souls no older than Amara, their small hands clutching at the troopers' sleeves like lifelines. No violence had marred the dawn, the guards folded under the weight of evidence, confessions spilling faster than the rain earlier. Crowley's arrest at the gala played on every local feed now, his polished facade shattered, the gear pin on his lapel a damning exhibit in Ruiz's unfolding case. The network unraveled thread by thread, drop points exposed, accomplices named, the sheriff's office swept clean by federal shadows descending like hawks. Diesel's mind replayed the hallway confrontation, Crowley's eyes meeting his in that final, fractured moment. Defiance crumbling to desperation. "You think this ends me?" the man had hissed, voice a rasp under the chandelier's fading glow. But Diesel had only nodded, the weight of Amara's trust heavier than any retort. "It ends the dark for them," he'd said, stepping aside as the cuffs clicked. No vengeance, just the quiet justice of light-piercing lies, the moral poetry of a predator stripped bare before the town's awakening eyes. The gala's murmurs had turned to outrage, reporters swarming like bees to spilled honey, headlines etching the truth into permanence. A pillar fallen, children reclaimed. The convoy veered toward the safe house, a modest cabin nestled in a clearing of evergreens, its windows glowing warm against the paling mist. Tessa met them at the porch, her wire-rimmed glasses catching the sunrise, arms open as the rescued ones tumbled from the troopers' cars. Now 7 in total, their faces a mosaic of exhaustion and budding relief. Amara burst from the door first, barefoot again but wrapped in a clean sweater, her dark hair tousled from fitful sleep. She ran straight to Diesel, launching into his arms as he dismounted, her small body fitting against his like a missing piece. "You came back," she whispered, breath warm against his neck. The crayon drawing clutched in her fist, a fleet of bikes under a sun that chased away clouds. Always, Diesel rumbled, his voice thick, setting her down gently, but keeping her hand in his. The other children gathered, tentative at first, then clustering close as Tessa herded them inside with mugs of hot cocoa, steaming in the chill air. Liam clutched his bear tighter, Elsie trailing Amara like a shadow-turned friend. The cabin smelled of baked oats and pine from the hearth, a sanctuary pieced from the club's quiet donations, blankets from Lena's sewing, toys scavenged by Rocco's steady hands. Jax joined them, his limp more pronounced in the stillness, clapping shoulders with the troopers who lingered to debrief. "You pulled through," Captain Ruiz said, her braid silver in the light, extending a hand to the president. "Your intel saved lives tonight. We'll need statements, but the Pikes have our respect. No charges, just thanks." Naomi arrived last, her sedan crunching gravel, laptop tucked under her arm like a trophy. At 34, her eyes shone with the vindication of cases won against steeper odds. Her own redemption woven into the club's fabric since that courtroom stand years back. "It's systemic," she reported over coffee, maps forgotten on the table now replaced by case files. Crowley's ledgers tie to out-of-state routes, foster scams, fake adoptions, but with the footage, the confessions, it's done. Reunions start today, families notified, safe houses secured. Her words landed soft, a balm to the raw edges, but Diesel saw the undercurrent, the ethical scars of a world where such darkness festered unchecked until hands like theirs reached in. As the troopers departed, engines fading into the morning hum of birdsong, the club circled the porch, a family forged in the night's forge. Jax raised his mug, the steam curling like unspoken bonds. "To the small ones," he said, voice gravel-worn but steady, "and the promises that hold." Nods rippled through, Rocco's scarred arms folding, Lena's quick smile flashing, Tessa's quiet gaze on the children inside, colouring new worlds free of fear. Diesel felt it then, the full measure of redemption, not erasure of his brother's loss, but a legacy built on it, honouring the vulnerable through actions silent yet seismic. Amara tugged his sleeve, pointing to the horizon where the sun crested fully, gilding the pines. "They can't hide anymore," she said, her voice small but sure, echoing the oath that had pulled them all together. The day unfolded in measured grace, social workers arriving with gentle efficiency, reuniting the children with kin or weaving new safety nets where blood had failed. Amara's mother, tear-streaked and grateful, embraced Diesel like an old guardian, whispering thanks that hung heavy in the air. The Iron Pikes lingered on the edges, not heroes in spotlights but watchers in the wings, their vests traded for plain shirts, bikes idling ready for the next call. Crowley's empire crumbled in courtrooms and headlines, accomplices scattering like leaves in wind, the town's moral compass realigned by the light they'd cast. No graves unearthed that day, but the missing shadows lifted, justice's quiet poetry prevailing over corruption's roar. By noon, the mist burned off, leaving skies vast and clear, the road calling once more. Diesel mounted up last, Amara waving from the porch, her smile a spark against the ordinary world, reclaiming her. The convoy rolled out, engines a harmonious thunder fading into the distance, bound for the clubhouse, where maps would wait for tomorrow's rides. Diesel glanced back once, the cabin shrinking, the weight in his chest now one of fulfillment. A promise survived the time, loyalty's fire unquenched. In a cynical world, they'd chosen family, chased redemption through the dark, and emerged with honor's legacy intact. Actions silent, consequences eternal. The sun climbed higher, warming the leather at his back, as the Iron Pikes rode on, guardians of the overlooked, their oath a beacon against whatever shadows lay ahead. Thank you for riding with us through this tale of unbreakable promises and quiet courage. If it moved you, please subscribe for more stories that honor the heart's true north. We'll see you on the next road.